You ever meet someone so entitled, they start acting like they own the earth itself? Well, this woman, this so-called HOA queen, saw my little cabin going up in the hills and decided it was her duty to stop it. She marched down my dirt road like she ran the government, slapped fake violation notices on my door, and even called the cops, all because she thought I was trespassing on her precious community land. But here's the kicker. Not only was I not trespassing, the land she was yelling about, I didn't just own that piece, I owned the whole valley. Yeah, every pine tree, every hillside, every creek that ran through it. She had no idea who she was messing with until it was too late. Where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels. So let me take you back to how all this started. After working as a forest ranger for over 2 decades, I finally decided to slow down. The city noise, the deadlines, the constant rush. I'd had enough. What I really wanted was peace, solitude, the kind of quiet you only get when the only sounds around you are wind through pine trees and the rush of a creek after a spring rain. When my grandfather passed, he left me something priceless. 300 acres of untouched land tucked away in a quiet mountain valley. This land had been in our family for generations. No developments, no businesses, just wildflowers, trails, and deer tracks. So I decided to build a small off-grid cabin by the creek. Nothing fancy, just a simple wooden home with a porch facing the sunrise and enough space for my dog and me. It was the kind of dream people write country songs about. But dreams don't always come easy, especially when someone like her is living next door. Enter Cheryl Kensington. She wasn't part of the original community. She was one of the newer transplants, moved in about a year ago to a fancy house in a nearby subdivision that had just gone up on the edge of the valley. And even though there was no legally recognized HOA, Cheryl acted like she was president of one. Self-appointed, of course. You know the type, clipboard in hand, sunglasses that never come off, constantly on patrol for violations no one asked her to enforce. She treated every gravel driveway like it was a threat to her kingdom. So when she saw the beams going up on my cabin, she didn't come over and say hello. She didn't ask who I was or what I was building. No. She drove past slow, glaring from her window, then came back the next day to stick a fake "Stop Construction" notice right on my unfinished wall. It looked official until you read it and realized it was just a printout from some random website. At first, I thought it was a joke, a misunderstanding maybe. But that was just the beginning. Because Cheryl? She wasn't going to stop until she put me in my place. And that was her first big mistake. Now, I'm not the kind of guy who looks for trouble. I believe in minding my business, doing honest work, and letting people be. But Cheryl? She wasn't interested in any of that. She had a mission: to shut me down. A couple of days after the fake stop work notice, I came back from a supply run to find orange cones blocking the little dirt trail I used to get to my cabin site. Not even the county had ever bothered with that path, but there they were, lined up like she owned the whole forest. Next came the threats. Little notes started showing up, taped to the trees and nailed to fence posts. Stuff like, "You are in violation of HOA standards," and "Remove structure or face fines." Except there was no official HOA here, just Cheryl and her printer trying to play judge, jury, and land developer. I stayed calm. I kept building. I wasn't hurting anyone, and I knew my rights. But deep down, I could feel the storm brewing. You could see it in the way she'd slow her car to a crawl when passing by, the way she'd glare like I was stealing air from her. And then she brought the police. One warm morning, while I was laying down roofing panels, I heard tires crunching on gravel. I stepped outside, and there they were, 2 patrol cars parked behind Cheryl's SUV. And there she was, arms folded, sunglasses on, holding a stack of papers like she was about to shut down a cartel. She pointed at my cabin, raised her voice, and told the officers that I was trespassing, that I had no right to build here, that I was damaging protected HOA land. One of the cops looked confused. The other was already writing something in his notepad. I didn't panic. I didn't yell. I just walked inside my cabin and came back with a folder, thick with papers, maps, deeds, and my grandfather's original land grants going back 60 years. I handed them over to the officer and said one sentence. This valley has been in my family since before Cheryl ever learned to spell HOA. The officers looked at the documents. And that's when things started to shift, because Cheryl had made a loud, embarrassing mistake, and the truth was about to bite her back, hard. The officer took his time flipping through the paperwork, original land surveys, tax receipts, property line maps, even notarized records from the county courthouse. You could see it on his face. The deeper he read, the more uncomfortable he looked. The second officer leaned in, reading over his shoulder. Cheryl stood there, arms still crossed, but her confidence was starting to crack. Finally, one of the officers looked at her and said, "Ma'am, according to these records, this entire area, including the trail, the creek, and the land behind those trees, belongs to Mr. Carver here." You could have heard a pine needle drop. Cheryl blinked. Once, twice. Then she stepped forward, raising her voice like she was trying to reset the narrative. "No, that's not possible. This whole section is part of the Willow Ridge HOA. He's not allowed to build here. I've got the rules right here." She held up her own stack of papers, printed guidelines she had written herself, filled with terms like community aesthetics and unauthorized structures. The officers didn't even glance at them. "Ma'am," the cop said gently, "this land is private property. And the title is very clear. You have no jurisdiction here." Her mouth opened like she wanted to fight back, but nothing came out. A few neighbors had come over by then, curious about the commotion. You could see it in their eyes, the disbelief, the embarrassment. Some of them had followed Cheryl's lead for months, thinking she had authority. But now, in broad daylight, in front of cops and the very man she tried to evict, she was being exposed for what she really was, a bully with a clipboard and no real power. She tried one last time, saying, "Well, I've lived here for over a year and we've always treated this area as part of the neighborhood. And I just said, quietly, you can treat it however you want, but I own it." It was over. The queen of her imaginary kingdom had just been dethroned by a man with quiet patience and the law on his side. After that moment, it was like the air itself shifted. Cheryl didn't say another word. She turned sharply, stormed back to her SUV, and peeled off down the gravel road, kicking up dust like a defeated movie villain. The police gave me a nod, respectful, maybe even a little apologetic, and drove off too, leaving the valley quiet again. But the damage Cheryl did to her own reputation? That stuck. Over the next few weeks, word spread through the surrounding neighborhoods. People who used to nod and smile at her started keeping their distance. Some even apologized to me, said they had no idea she wasn't official, that they thought there really was an HOA managing the area. I didn't hold a grudge. I kept building. But something interesting started happening. Neighbors who had once kept to themselves now started stopping by. A retired couple brought fresh eggs from their hens. A young guy who just bought property nearby asked if I could show him where the property lines really were. One afternoon, even the mayor's assistant emailed, asking if I'd considered joining the town's conservation council. I wasn't just building a cabin anymore. I was becoming part of something again. Not because I shouted or threatened or tried to control others like Cheryl did, but because I stood my ground with quiet strength and let the truth do the talking. Funny how things work out when you lead with respect instead of ego. It's been over a year since that day Cheryl tried to run me off my own land. The cabin's done now, small, sturdy, and surrounded by everything I love. Whispering trees, a winding creek, and the kind of silence you can't buy in a city. My dog lounges on the porch every morning while I sip coffee and watch the sunrise spill across my valley. The one my grandfather cared for, the one I now protect. Cheryl? She still lives down in the subdivision, but she's quiet these days. The clipboard's gone. So are the fake notices and the angry emails. She doesn't wave when she drives by. But that's fine. Not everyone learns humility the easy way. What I've learned is this: some people chase control, others choose peace. And peace always wins, but only if you're willing to stand firm for it. Don't let loud voices drown out your truth. You don't need to shout to be heard, you just need to own your ground. Thanks for watching this far. If you've ever had to deal with a power-hungry neighbor or stood your ground for something that mattered, let me know in the comments. You're not alone, and remember, sometimes the quiet ones own the whole valley.